So I'm going to share a PowerPoint for this presentation. I'm going to talk about the agenda of what we'll be discussing today. And then I'll leave some time for a mindful eating practice. So you do not have to try this practice, but I highly encourage it. I think after going through the skills, it'll be helpful to do a little bit more of an interactive experience. And then I'll leave some room for questions. If you want to put your screen on, that would be great. You might feel more engaged and connected to this. If not, that's totally okay. But would love to see your faces and be able to interact that way. So I'm going to, hello. I am going to share a PowerPoint, and I'm going to be checking in on you guys from time to time to see if the connection's good, if you guys can see the PowerPoint. But feel free to unmute yourself if something happens and I don't see you. All right, so let me share this PowerPoint. Share. Okay, can everyone see this? If you can just give me a thumbs up. Okay, awesome. So agenda. So I'll be talking a little bit about the key points we'll be hitting on. So of course, we want to define what mindful eating is, factors or vulnerabilities that increase mindless and unhealthy eating, advantages of changing eating habits, actual tools on how to maintain balanced eating, preparing alternative activities other than eating, how to engage in problem-solving skills, a little bit of psychoeducation on eating and emotions, urge surfing, coping ahead, which are two skills that are really important when it comes to regulating emotions while eating, self-compassion in eating, and then of course we'll end off with our mindful eating practice, which you can and cannot do, whatever you prefer. I highly encourage it so that you can try some of these things out. All right. So next slide. Okay, so what is mindful eating? So, we talk about mindfulness a lot. So I'm going to I'm going to provide the definition of mindfulness and then how it applies to eating. So mindfulness is our ability to be focused on the present moment, being in the here and now, noticing when we're kind of steering off into the future or ruminating about the past, and attending to what's happening for us in this moment. And while we're attending to this present moment, we're trying to do it non-judgmentally. So we're not trying to judge our experience. We're not judging our thoughts, feelings, sensations. We're actually approaching it with a very non-judgmental stance. So we're acknowledging the thoughts that come up, acknowledging the feelings, the body sensations. So we might notice a thought of, oh my gosh, this food is so bad. Or we might notice anxiety when we start to eat. We might notice body sensations, so feeling restless or maybe racing heart. So all of those things are really important to start to identify and notice. So when we're being mindful, we're just noticing non-judgmentally and we're attending to what's happening in front of us. When we're able to do that and pay attention to the food that we eat, that can actually help increase gratitude for what we're eating. So having an appreciation for the food that we're eating, noticing the food that we're eating, where does this food come from? How did we even get this food? So slowing down, paying attention. I mean, how many times do you sit down and open, a jar of cookies or, peanut butter or fruit and just eat it really, really quickly without even noticing what's going on? So paying attention means slowing down, paying attention to the tastes, the smells, the touch, the feeling that we have, because that's a whole different experience. When we're mindfully eating, it's not impulsive eating, it's not quick. We're really appreciating and noticing the experiences. So we'll have a chance to actually practice this later. But again, it's attending to what's going on in front of us, particularly in eating, really being one with the activity. So factors that increase mindless and unhealthy eating. So before we even go into skills and tools, we want to figure out, why do we sometimes engage in mindless and unhealthy eating? So one is unstructured time. So let's talk about the quarantine and everything that's going on. Some people aren't working. Some people's work schedules have changed. So you might have a lot of free time. You might have not a lot of things going on. And so when we don't have a lot of things going on, we might be bored. We might not know what to do, and we might engage in binge eating or unhealthy eating or mindless eating because we don't have other things going on. Being alone is also a big vulnerability factor. So a lot of times people do engage in mindless eating or binge eating, if you would like to call it that. because no one's around, so they don't feel as much guilt or shame, or no one's really watching them. Interestingly enough, gaining weight is a reason why people engage in mindless and unhealthy eating. Sometimes people notice that they gained 1 pound and then they say, you know what, screw this. I'm trying so hard, but nothing's working. So I'm just going to end up eating anyway. So just noticing and seeing the number on the scale change could increase that. Unpleasant emotions. So again, quarantine 15, this is something that people are talking about on social media. So increased stress during the quarantine. And again, outside of the quarantine, it could be anything. So anxiety, depression, guilt, shame, envy and jealousy, interpersonal problems, work problems, all of those things could increase our ability or likelihood to overeat, because sometimes it's hard to regulate and manage emotions, and food might be a way to do that. It could be a way to comfort, self-soothe, and feel like you can get through the problem. For the women in the room, premenstrual tension. So there's a lot of times before the period starts, an increase in estrogen and progesterone do increase the likelihood that we might eat. It also could be due to bloating, or, just intense cravings for sugar, for chocolate, for sweets, maybe even irritability and mood changes before the period could increase the likelihood. A lot of times we end up putting food into categories of good and bad. So this is a good food, so I'm allowed to eat it. I should eat this. Versus a bad food. Once it's placed in the bad food category, we're labeling it as like forbidden. And when we do that, we might end up restricting and avoiding that food for a long time, but then having a big craving for it and saying, screw it, I'm just going to eat a lot of it. So putting things in good and bad categories actually increase the likelihood that we might end up binging on that bad food one day. Then there's a cycle of restricting and binging. So we tend to sometimes restrict food. Maybe we felt like we ate a lot the day before. And so we end up not eating for a long period of time, which increases the likelihood that then we'll binge, right? Because we're very, very hungry. And so restricting could lead to binging, which then leads to restricting again. So it becomes a kind of a vicious cycle. So if you find yourself going back and forth from those, that could be a big vulnerability. Another thing that's important is distraction while eating. So oftentimes we're distracted while eating. We're trying to do laundry. We're trying to write an email. We're trying to have a conversation with friends. We're trying to clean our apartments. And so when you're eating and doing all of those things, you might end up eating double what you would normally eat because you're not paying attention. You don't even notice that you're full, right? So distracting while eating is not helpful and doesn't actually let us find out when we'll be full and tune into those physiological cues that we are full. Messages from the media are also super important and a big influence. So, we see all of these fad diets, the keto diet, intermittent fasting, restricting certain foods, not eating carbs or only eating carbs. And so the media sends us messages or provides us different diets, people posting pictures of themselves, people posting things that you shouldn't eat or you should exercise all the time. So that does increase mindless and unhealthy eating because you might feel kind of let down, like, oh, I'm not able to do that exercise, or, oh man, I guess I shouldn't be eating carbs. I'm just going to eliminate that from my diet. So social media heavily influences our idea of our body, our shape, and weight. And there's a ton more, but these are kind of the biggest ones. Oh, everyone doing okay? Thumbs up? Okay, cool. So advantages of changing eating habits. So you want to think about the pros and cons of changing your eating habits. So I didn't write the disadvantages just because I wanted to kind of shorten the presentation, but you want to think about what would be the good things about changing my eating habits. Are there pros? Will I feel better about myself? Will it increase my self-esteem? Will I feel more confident? Will I feel more mastery? Will I feel like a better partner? Will I feel like a better friend? Will I feel like a better coworker? Will it improve my quality of life? So overeating or undereating, all of those things could could get in the way of your quality of life. Friendships, relationship with yourself. So asking yourself, how, if I do really spend time working on my eating habits, what will that do? What will be the positive consequences of that? Will my physical health be enhanced, right? So will this help my body? Will this help my weight, my BMI, my shape, the way I feel when I put on clothing, the way others perceive me? And will others benefit? So a lot of the times eating problems do impact others. So relationships you have with people, Maybe binging or restricting leads to mood changes, which then influences the way you interact with other people. So you want to figure out what are the advantages of changing eating habits for you. That is going to look different for all of us. So finding out, why is it worth even doing this? This is hard work, right? This is challenging. So making sure that you're really ready for this and there's enough pros to do this. Okay. So how to maintain balanced eating. So I thought that this was an important slide to share, and please don't be rigid about this. These are just some guidelines, but the problem is, especially with some of this unstructured time that we've seen in the quarantine, we don't have time to eat, or we're spending too much time eating. We don't schedule in time to eat. I know for me, I've been very busy, and so sometimes I find myself not eating for a long period of time, or if I have a 15-minute break, I'm like shoving food down my face. Or on the weekends, I end up eating a lot more because I do have all of this free time. So it is really important to find a good schedule for yourself. So this would be like a standard meal plan. So for example, having breakfast. So you want to stick to 3 meals. 3 meals would be good, with some snacks in between. So let's just say this is an example. Again, this might not work for you. Having breakfast at 8 a.m., then having some sort of mid-morning snack, lunch, a mid-afternoon snack, an evening meal, and then an evening snack. So kind of the rule of thumb is to try not to go more than 4 hours without eating. When you go more than 4 hours without eating, you're increasing the likelihood that you're going to binge because you're starving, you're hungry. The whole day has gone by and you're like waiting to eat the next thing. So this is going to reduce the likelihood that you're going to binge or overeat or mindlessly eat. So I want you to really think about that. You could even set reminders in your phone, like make sure to eat now. I actually schedule in lunch in my calendar because if I don't, I might not get to it, or I might say, that's not important. But we know that eating really helps regulate our mood and emotions, right? It's a vulnerability factor for us to experience these overwhelming emotions. So that goes for both overeating and undereating. So planning ahead is really important. If you know you have a 3-hour meeting, or if you know you're traveling somewhere, if you know that you have to take a 2-hour walk to get somewhere, plan ahead. Bring snacks in your bag, right? Bring little things that you can carry with you. You should never really say, there's no way for me to eat, there's no way for me to get food. You should always be planning something. Most importantly, if things go wrong, get back on the horse. If you end up not eating for 4 hours, or you end up binging or eating 5 snacks rather than any meal, that's okay. Don't beat yourself up. Don't be critical. Don't be judgmental. Just get back on the horse. Try again, right? If you end up eating one little thing that you didn't like, that you consider a bad food, get back on the horse. Don't say, you know what, now I'm going to just engage in a binge. Right? So it's being kind to yourself. And we're going to be talking about self-compassion a little bit later when you do end up falling off. Planning your food shopping. So if you are trying to eat healthy, trying to figure out what foods you want to get, making that list before you go food shopping, so you're not kind of going in there aimlessly without a plan. So preparing alternative activities. So what I was saying before is a lot of times boredom, unstructured time, not having anything to do, feeling lonely are big vulnerability factors for overeating or undereating. So you want to find activities you like. So I just wrote out a few. This is not an exhaustive list. You need to figure out what works for you. So if going for a walk or a bike ride, doing something active is a pleasurable alternative activity, or calling a friend, catching up on some emails, playing a game, doing a puzzle, shopping, taking a bath, volunteering, writing. So remember, this is, kind of like a buffet, right? You go back for the things that you like. If an activity is working for you, you want to keep that in your repertoire. Sometimes what happens is you end up saying, well, I don't know what I like, or I forget what I like. And, you might say, well, then screw it. I'm just going to end up eating or hanging out and doing nothing. So you want to make sure you write down the activities that you really like. You can even keep it in your notepad, right? So you can always refer to this list. If your emotions are high or you forget what you want to do, you always have this list to kind of remind you of things to do. I would say preferably an active activity. So, watching TV or hanging out on the couch, those are all fine. But sometimes what happens is if it's not active, we may just be bored, mindless, and end up going to overeat. You also want the activity to not be a chore, right? So, doing laundry or cleaning your apartment could feel like a chore. So sometimes you want to make sure that it's an enjoyable activity, right? That you're excited for, that you get some pleasure from, and that it's realistic, right? If you say that you want to go travel somewhere right now far away, that might not be realistic based on the quarantine and the circumstances. Something that really helps me is music. So music is a mood enhancer. And so if you find some music that helps change and shift your mood, that can do it really quickly for you. And you might even have a specific playlist that you refer to when you are feeling overwhelmed, your mood is really, really strong. And that could really shift things for you pretty rapidly. Problem solving skills. So a lot of times, we think that the problem is that we're having urges to binge, but really we're having other problems in our life. So maybe it's that you're bored and have nothing to do and you're feeling lonely. Or maybe it's that you've just gotten into a big argument with a friend or a colleague. Or maybe it's that you have so much on your plate for work, or you're trying to plan something and you're feeling overwhelmed and stressed. So you want to identify the problem as soon as possible. And I'm just using this example here just because I think it's pretty simple. But you also want to specify the problem accurately. So again, sometimes you think that the problem is urges to binge, where really it's I have nothing to do tonight and I'm tired. And that's going to be a vulnerability factor to binge or overeat. So you want to consider as many solutions as possible. So at this point, you brainstorm everything possible that you would like to do, and don't judge any of them, right? This is just our brainstorming process. So for example, watching TV, going to bed, going online, calling some friends, cleaning the apartment, or jogging. And so again, these are all of our solutions. These are all of our options. And then we get into kind of judgment mode. So let's talk about all of these. So let's see, watching TV. I don't know about that. Me sitting on the couch, like I'm going to be bored. There's really nothing to watch on the TV and my urges are just going to go up. So I don't know about that one. Going to bed. So that might sound like a great idea. Maybe that does work for you, but maybe you say, I don't know, it's not really solving my problem. It just makes me feel worse and more tired. Maybe I feel like a failure. And then I just want to binge even more. Going on Facebook. So maybe that's a good idea, but then you think, I'm not feeling so great about myself, or I've been comparing myself and I just don't want to be involved in social media right now. It's just going to make me feel worse. Calling friends. So, okay, that's a good idea. I know I like feeling connected to people. I know that makes me feel better. I know I like being heard and listened to. So that's a good one. Thumbs up. Going on a jog. That's meant to say jog, not job. So going on a jog. So you might think, you know what, I'm not feeling so good about myself. I'm feeling overweight, or I don't feel good in my body. So that's not a good idea. And it's raining out. Well, it's just drizzling. Maybe I can go on a brisk walk instead. Maybe that will help me release some stored up energy and I could feel good walking. Okay, so now you have two solutions. You have calling a friend and you have going on a jog. That's a lovely combo, right? And again, that's not going to work for everyone. This is just an example. So you choose both of those and then you have to act on the solution. So a lot of the times what happens is we come up with a great plan, but we never actually take the steps to engage in them. So acting on the solution is kind of the way to actually get yourself started on this. And remember, problem solving is going to look different for everyone, and there's going to be tons of problems that we're dealing with. So the step-by-step approach can be helpful. And by the way, I'm going to be sending this PowerPoint to everyone. I probably should have said that a little bit earlier, so you'll have all of this to reference. Eating and emotion. So that's kind of the rest of the presentation, and something really important, because what we know is that the emotions are a big prompting event for eating episodes. So emotions, and I'll talk a little bit more about emotions in a second, could either increase our eating habits, right? We might want to eat more, or it decreases our eating habits. So you have to figure out what happens for you or what happens for your clients. So figuring out how that works for you. Restricting and binging may be a way of managing emotions. So not eating, restricting or eating could be a way to regulate, right? That probably helps in the short term. It probably actually does the trick very well. In the short term, we might feel better. We might feel less anxious, angry, shame, guilt, but it kind of has the opposite effect where it makes us feel worse after. There's probably a lot of secondary effects that aren't so helpful. Indulging when you feel difficult emotions in order to soothe. So again, food is a self-soothe method. The problem is when we use it to self-soothe and that's our only coping skill, that's sending unhelpful messages that you can't cope. And then it could result to harsh diets. So you might think about how many times, and I am guilty of this, have I, overate in my opinion. And then I was like, you know what, I may just, eat a little bit less the next day, right? And then it turns into this vicious cycle and you end up being trapped and stuck there. So again, if you're turning to food and that's your only way to cope and manage stress, that's sending this message that I can't deal with my life problems in any other way. So, part of this is also the social media or just our culture, right? If, there's been a bad breakup or if you just got fired or laid off, people might give you cupcakes or might send you baked goods or say, oh, you'll feel better, just eat a donut, which absolutely, please eat a donut. That's great. That will help you feel better, right? That's important. And we'll talk about, taste as a self-soothe skill. But if that's the only thing that you lean on and rely on, that may be a problem. Something that's super important is it's inevitable to experience uncomfortable emotions. So something we talk about in DBT is life is full of painful experiences. Life is full of pain, and you're going to experience painful and uncomfortable emotions no matter what. There's kind of no way to avoid that. There's no way to run away from it. It's all around us. Even in the best things in life, we're going to experience uncomfortable emotions, which is important because uncomfortable emotions are communicating something to us. They're telling something. They're telling us something. Avoiding feelings, so running away, suppressing, is only going to make these feelings stronger in the long term. So you're just going to end up feeling worse and feeling like they're going to explode, almost like a volcano. I like to use the metaphor of pushing a beach ball in water. If you try to push a beach ball in water, you're going to end up just exploding, right? The ball is just going to end up kind of jumping out. And so we need to start approaching and accepting and going towards our emotions so we know how to deal and process with them. Everyone doing okay? Okay, awesome, great. Okay, so eating and emotions exercise. So I'm just being mindful of time, and of course we're not gonna have time to do this whole exercise, but this is a really, really good exercise. And if you guys are willing, I would love for you to try this when you do eat the next time. So first of all, we have to be mindful of our emotions, which may be really hard. And of course, this is just 1 hour talk. But we have to start identifying what we're feeling. And we might not even know all the emotions, right? So I listed some of them here: anxiety, sadness, anger, guilt, shame, love, disgust, envy, jealousy, shame. I think I wrote shame twice. I see that now. But we have to first identify what we're feeling. And we need to know, what is that emotion? So if I'm feeling my heart racing, or if my legs are tingly, or if I'm noticing these racing thoughts, that might be anxiety. Right? Or if I'm feeling really sad, I might be feeling really heavy or withdrawn or sitting down or slow and lethargic. So it's important to kind of figure out what's going on in our body, what are our thoughts, so that can help us identify the emotion. So before you eat next time, I encourage you, or for your clients, whoever is participating in this, grab a notebook and come to mind a time where you overate or were very hungry. And I want you to answer these questions as non-judgmentally as you can. So what was the situation? So where were you? Were you sitting in your kitchen? Were you out to lunch with a friend? And what was happening? Were you in a difficult conversation? Or were you really stressed out from a project at work and then you sat down to eat and you were just so overwhelmed? So it's really important to identify all the external and internal cues that are going on, because that's going to give us some information. So it's kind of becoming an observer and an investigator of what is happening right before we eat. Then trying to figure out what emotions were present. What were you feeling? So again, when we're talking about describing emotions, what was happening in our body? What was happening with our thoughts? What were we noticing was going on? How did your emotions affect your eating? So again, if someone's feeling really sad or feeling anxious, did you end up eating more? Right? So if you're feeling neutral or good and happy, maybe you're not eating as much, which also that can increase eating. But figuring out what emotions affected my eating, and did I end up eating more than I wanted? Now bringing to mind the emotions you experienced after eating. So if you did end up eating more than you wanted to, what happened after? Did you feel really guilty? Did you feel really down on yourself? Were you having self-critical thoughts like, oh, I'm such an idiot, or oh my God, I always do this, or what's wrong with me? Why can't I get this together? So this is if you guys want to do this on your own, this is a good way to break it down and to really start observing and describing what's happening. So urge surfing. So this is really important. So we're going to have urges, right? And the problem is when people have urges, they think I have to act on this urge. If I'm having this urge, it means I must give into it. And the stronger the urge, the more likely you are to give into it. So sometimes it gets so overwhelming that you're like, I just have to give into this. So for example, I had a client tell me that they were waiting in line for coffee and then they saw a cranberry muffin and they already had breakfast and they were getting on with their day. And they said, but I have to have this muffin. I have to have it. I'm having such urges. I need to have it. The sugar will taste so good. I hate my job anyway. So this is just going to help me feel better. Right. And their urges were really, really high. And so guess what? They had the thought, if I don't just give into this urge, I'm going to be thinking and obsessing and ruminating about this all day. So they bought the cranberry muffin because the urges were really high. And so it is confusing because urges make us feel like we have to go towards it. But an urge is just an urge. And if you see in the corner of the screen, there's a really good quote. And I'm having trouble seeing it because you guys are all, okay, there it is. You can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf. So the point is we can't stop the urges from coming up, right? Urges do go down sometimes, but we can't really stop urges from coming, but we can change the way we respond and react to urges. So slowing down and taking a step back is helpful, right? So it's kind of stopping, taking a step back, observing that we're having urges, because if you don't even know you have the urge, that's a problem. You have to notice that an urge is happening in order to figure out how to respond to it. And don't get me wrong, if you're having an urge to have food and it's helpful and it's effective and you want it, please do it, right? It's only if this is an unhelpful urge. So urges are good, right? Urges tell us what we want and what we need. Asking yourself, will satisfying this urge relate to what you value? So does this fit into my life worth living? Is this part of what I'm looking for? Is this part of my goals and what I'm working on? And will this work in the long term? So giving into urges feels really good in the moment. I mean, I know, but is this going to help me long term? Does this help me achieve my goals? Does this help me solve my problem or whatever I'm dealing with, right? So if, again, this person's really hating work, you know, you might have to figure out, do I want a different job? Or how can I change the things that are going on in my job rather than always resorting to food as a way to cope with it? You know, another question, what would happen if the urge got stronger and stronger and you just noticed it? So again, sometimes we just give in and react so quickly and we never actually let ourselves get to the point where the urge gets to the top and then starts to go down, right? So it's reinforcing this belief that we can't handle our urges because every time they go so high, we give in to them. So urges do go up and down, right? It's like a wave and we're meant to be surfing the wave. We're meant to be riding the wave so that we don't always give into our unhelpful urges. And then let's be real here. How many times have you had a very strong urge and you didn't give into it, right? I've had urges to lash out at my partner. I've had urges to stay in bed all day. I've had urges to, you know, avoid looking at my finances, right? But I didn't give into certain urges. So you might ask yourself, have there been urges that were really strong that I didn't satisfy? And if that's true, then you're capable, right? It's possible to not give into the urge. It just might be much harder with food. And then again, kind of going back to these mindfulness skills of where am I feeling this urge in my body, right? Maybe I'm feeling the urge strongly in my stomach or even in my back, and there's a lot of tension. And how strong is the urge? So again, on a scale from 0 to 10, 0 meaning the urge is barely there. It's not there at all. 10 is this is the strongest urge I've ever felt. And then what is your thoughts telling you? Is your mind saying you have to give into this? This is going to be so great. Oh, just here's one more time that I'll do it. I'll start tomorrow. Are you willing to watch the urges go up and down? And are you willing to sit with discomfort, right? A lot of the times the problem is people have difficulty sitting with discomfort. So you immediately want to satisfy that discomfort by giving into food. So urge surfing is really important. And you can even visualize it, right? You can even imagine yourself kind of going up and down on the wave of urge surfing. Coping ahead. So this is also a really important skill that helps us regulate and manage our emotions. So coping ahead is a skill for when you know that you have a distressing situation coming up in the future, whether it's a one-time situation, whether it's a situation that happens often, whether you're seeing a group of people that you have to communicate with often. Coping ahead means that we're planning how we're going to handle the situation in the future. So how will I manage the distress that comes up? How will I manage my anxiety and fear? How will I be prepared for this? And they've done a lot of research with athletes about this mental rehearsal. So athletes, let's just say a tennis player, they did research that if they actually practice getting the ball in the court in their mind over and over again, they're more likely to be successful when it actually happens. They also did research that if you practice being assertive in your mind and you practice in role play, you're more likely to be effective when that time comes. So in this skill, coping ahead is the same thing. You're practicing and you're rehearsing being put in a difficult situation in the here and now. So when you're rehearsing it, you're saying, okay, when I get, and I'm going to use this example actually, so I'll get there in a second. But things that you might cope ahead with are any challenging emotional situation. So, asking your boss for a raise or telling your partner you're unhappy with something. Or it could be with food related triggers. So there's an example here. So let's say you're coming home from work on Monday after seeing your sister and your sister's leaving, right? So she was just in town for a short amount of time and you're really, really sad. So your sister left town, you're feeling really upset. And you know that when you get home, you're likely to overeat or binge or engage in any unhealthy eating patterns because you're sad or you might be bored. So you want to cope ahead for that. You already know that's a distressing situation coming up. So coping ahead would be to say, okay, that day I'm going to make sure I eat my regular meals, right? So remember that every 4 hours, make sure that I have something in my system to reduce the vulnerability. I'm going to set up a Zoom meeting or, Skype with friends because I know I'm going to be feeling really sad. I could buy a magazine I like. I could even plan to cook, which could also help build mastery, right? It could be a challenging activity that helps you, build a sense of accomplishment by doing something challenging. And then visualizing coming home and managing these urges and urge surfing. And so when you do cope ahead, what's actually really helpful is to close your eyes. So what I do with my clients in session is I'll actually have them close their eyes and I'll say, okay, so I'm walking into my home. I'm starting to feel really sad about my sister leaving. I'm having the thought, oh, I just want to order a pie of pizza and just eat it all. Then I start to pull up my Zoom. I Zoom with friends, right? So you would actually want to practice it in the here and now so you can visualize it to make it more likely that you'll be successful at doing it. So self-compassion and eating. So self-compassion is a tough topic. I think this is one of the things my clients struggle with the most. Self-compassion is the idea of being kind to yourself, right? Not being harsh, critical, being open to failures, being open to mistakes, being open to any negative judgments about yourself, and noticing that we're all going to suffer in some way. Right? Noticing that we're all going to have difficulties along the road and being kind about that rather than putting ourselves down, judging ourselves, right? I think that the toughest thing is that we're our biggest critics, right? We are our own worst enemies. We can be our own worst bully sometimes, but it's interesting how we wouldn't do that to somebody else. If you think about someone you really love and care about or someone you really respect and appreciate, you're probably going to have compassion for them rather than beating them up, being critical, being harsh, being threatening. So self-compassion is being non-judgmental towards the self. It's forgiving yourself if you do make a mistake or you do something that doesn't engage or fits in line with your values and goals. And it's accepting setbacks. So instead of saying, I'm so stupid, I messed up, I ate this whole pizza, what's wrong with me? Screw it. I'm just going to end up overeating for the rest of the week. You actually forgive yourself, you accept it, and you figure out, how do I change this behavior in the future? It's very challenging to cultivate self-compassion, right? Some people may have the thought, well, I don't want to be self-compassionate, right? That feels weird, or that feels icky, or that feels too touchy-feely, or I don't deserve to be compassionate towards myself, right? So you have to think about what gets in the way of you not being self-compassionate. And the thing is, with food, comfort from food is fleeting. Meaning you get the comfort from food. It probably helps very much in the short term, but it's an external way to get support and soothing rather than getting it from yourself. So again, a lot of times thinking about what's the short term and long term. Yes, this is going to comfort me in the short term, but in the long term, I might feel worse about myself, which will probably not help with my self-compassion. So this is another practice of how to do self-compassion. And I like this one a lot because I think because people struggle with this so much, we want to take a step back and try it from a different approach. So it might be actually helpful to bring an image of a compassionate other. So I want everyone to kind of think about this right now. You don't have to, we're not going to go into this in much detail, but think about a person that you have a lot of compassion for. It could be your friend. It could be a grandparent, a teacher, your therapist, a family member, someone on TV, right? It could be anyone. So I want you to kind of think about that person and think about details of that person. So what do they look like, right? What are their characteristics? What does their voice sound like? What do they look like, right? What is their posture? So really trying to visualize this person and get close to them. And then how do you feel when you're with this person, right? What does this person do for you? Do you feel confident? Do you feel cared about? Do you feel respected? Do you feel loved? And then writing a supportive letter to yourself from the perspective of them. So again, this person is probably going to have a lot of positive things to say about you. They're going to be encouraging. They're going to cheerlead you, right? They're going to be non-judgmental and non-critical. So that might help you with, okay, what would be some nice things I would say to myself, right? How would it feel if this person wrote a letter to me? And can I somehow apply that to myself? So this could be a pretty emotional kind of activity if you really do try this on your own. So what would they say when you face a challenge? So again, when someone feels like they made a mistake or messed up or they didn't do well in a meeting, instead of saying I'm such an idiot or I'm incompetent or oh, I'm the worst or I always mess up or people think I'm so weird, that's probably not what you would say to a friend, or that's probably not what they would say to you. So figuring out what are they going to say that's probably validating, understanding, and full of empathy. You want to visualize how this interaction would go or how this letter would feel. So imagining the warmth and the understanding that comes from this. And again, just like I was talking about those self-critical thoughts, using that as an opportunity to turn to compassion. So validating. So it must be really difficult to mess up or make a mistake in the meeting. Or when your boss yelled at you, that must have been really challenging. Or man, of course I'm feeling anxious, right? I just got negative feedback. So that's a compassionate way to talk to yourself rather than beating yourself up, which is just going to increase those negative emotions and make you more likely to engage in unhealthy eating patterns. How we doing? Doing okay? Okay, cool. So we're actually going to jump into our mindful eating exercise in just a bit. But how to mindfully eat. So first, let's talk a little bit about how to do it, and then we'll actually try it out. So research shows that distracting during a meal increases the food intake. So again, I'm guilty of this. I've noticed that I'll open up something in my fridge and I'll eat it really quickly as I'm talking to someone or as I'm writing an email, and I'll end up eating a lot more because I'm doing two things at once. I'm not even paying attention. I don't even notice what's going into my body. A lot of times people think multitasking is productive, right? I can get a bunch of things done. I'll feel so much better. But really, we're not really able to divert our attention from one thing to another. We end up just not doing so well in either of the activities or however many we're doing. The problem is a lot of times we don't want to actually pay attention to what we're eating because we feel anxiety when we're eating, or we feel guilt in the context of eating. So you might not want to sit with those emotions. So you might say, I have to watch a TV show, or I have to be on the phone while I eat, or I have to be cleaning while I eat because I can't tolerate sitting with the anxiety or even the guilt of eating. But meal times are actually a really important time to practice and notice and sit with the feelings. Because also what you're going to learn is your emotions, they're not going to do anything harmful for you, right? They're not catastrophic. They might feel distressing. They might feel uncomfortable, but they're not going to do anything terrible to you. Every time you allow yourself to actually sit with your emotions while you eat, you'll notice that it's like an exposure. It gets easier and it gets less stressful as time goes on. Again, going back to this multitasking and eating too quickly, we're not really paying attention to our food, so our eating speed increases. When I'm not paying attention, I'm just popping things in my mouth, and all of a sudden I way overate, and then I don't feel so good. So that's some things to consider. When you're mindfully eating, let's just be honest. How many of you actually sit down when you're eating, or are you sometimes standing up or walking around or running somewhere? I know that life is busy, life is stressful. There's so much going on in the world right now. So finding a seat, sitting down, noticing the food, so paying attention to it, which we're going to practice, taking a moment to notice sensations after eating, giving thanks to the host or restaurant if we are eating out, which is, maybe unlikely right now, but I don't think that we give enough thanks and gratitude to the food that's on our plate or how it was actually served to us. All the people that were involved in preparing the food, getting the food, growing the food. So actually having some gratitude and appreciation for how we even got that food on our plate in the first place. Slowing down. So, the interesting thing, and you might have all heard about this, is you don't actually start to feel full until 20 minutes after we eat. So if you actually eat slowly, take a step back, slow things down, you actually might feel more full rather than saying, well, I'm so hungry after 5 minutes of eating, which may trick you into wanting to eat more. So observing our degree of physiological hunger, putting down our fork between bites. This is really, really hard. I have tried this. I have failed a lot at it. I'm doing my best. But putting your fork down, drinking some water, engaging in the conversation you're having, or even just with yourself if you're just mindfully eating on your own, and bringing awareness to each bite. So I would love for you all to participate in this. I'm not going to, force anyone to do this, but I'm curious if everyone could go, and again, you don't have to do this. If you don't do it, I'll just read the script of how I might practice this. But if you guys are willing, grabbing something in your kitchen right now that you can practice this with. So what I mean by that is something small. So I actually have a blueberry. So it could be a piece of fruit. It could be a piece of chocolate. It could be a piece of cheese. It could be really anything small that you can easily chew. I would love if you guys participated. So I'll give you a minute or two to go grab that thing, and then we'll come back. I think we're just going to wait on one person. I'm going to stop the share for 1 second. And if any one of you want to privately chat me and just let me know like the food that you have, some of you that don't have the video on, I'm just not sure who is participating in this. But if you do want to tell me the food you have or send it publicly in the chat, you can do that. But I'm going to get started in just under a minute with the practice. Awesome. Cool. Great. Some of you have stuff. Okay. Okay. Let me share the screen again, even though we will not be using this, but I'm going to be kind of glad. So I'm not going to do the exercise with you. I'll try my best to do some of it, but not the eating part so I can talk. But basically, I want you all to get into a comfortable position. So a wide awake posture. So kind of like sitting up tall, getting comfortable in your seat, and just starting to pay attention to where you are. So, putting your feet on the ground, noticing where your arms are, kind of really engaging with this present moment. So starting to really check in with what's happening. So when we do mindful eating, we really want to pay attention using all of our senses with our food. So I want you to pick up your food and I want you to look at it. So I want you to notice it. So I want you to look at it as if you're like an alien that just got to Earth and you've never seen this item. So I just want you to kind of look all around it. Notice the colors, notice the texture, notice the way the light hits it. So again, like you're a newborn baby, you've never seen this in your life. So really looking at it. And then I really want you to pay attention to the touch. So I want you to maybe like caress the food. Play with it in your hand. Notice if it feels soft, if it feels firm, if it feels rough, if it feels dry. So again, it's like you've never touched this food before. Meanwhile, you might eat this thing every day. Notice the weight of it, how it feels in your hand. And then I want you to notice the smell. So try to smell your food. Maybe your food, I know my blueberry does not smell like anything, but bring awareness to the smell of it. Is there something that you've never noticed? Does it smell interesting? Does it smell fresh? Does it smell old? What does it smell like? Now for the fun part, taste. So this is going to be difficult, so listen to my direction. So I first want you to just place the food so I could see if it's a bigger object, just taking a bite of it. Taking a bite of it and just letting it sit in your mouth. So this might feel weird, but I don't want you to chew or swallow it yet. So I want you to just notice what it feels like in your mouth. So how it feels like with your saliva, how it feels against your teeth, how it feels against your tongue, how it feels against the roof of your mouth. You're just starting to really notice what this feels like. And now you get to actually chew it, which may be really difficult before to not chew it. So I want you to very slowly chew it. Notice what that feels like. Notice if your mouth is getting more dry, or if it's starting to get really small, or how this texture is changing. Notice when you do start to chew, if you do start to swallow right away, notice how it feels going down your esophagus or going down into your stomach area. So noticing kind of all of that experience. Okay. So you might ask yourself, I've never eaten in this very attentive, specific kind of way, but this is just one step towards mindful eating, right? It's really paying attention to the taste, the texture. What does this feel like? Of course, this is just a little bite, but am I feeling more full because I actually sat down and I ate slowly and I paid attention and just did this one thing at a time? Um, how does this differ from when you normally eat? You might ask yourself, oh my gosh, like sometimes I have no idea what I just ate and it's been 5 minutes. So paying attention to the difference between mindfully and slowly eating and paying attention with curiosity versus just kind of shoving some food down. And then my next question is, would you be willing to practice this at a meal? Right? So, some of you might have heard of this, but I actually attended a mindful eating conference and I had to eat in a group of people silently for 30 minutes. So we're all at the same table, but I had to just eat by myself, not say anything, and really notice and investigate and check out my food. And that was a very interesting experience. I felt anxious about it. I'm like, no, I just want to eat this faster. I want to talk. But it was very interesting seeing what comes up when I'm kind of have to sit with this. So this was, one way to practice mindful eating. I encourage at your next meal to sit down by yourself, no distractions, no TV, no nothing, taking the fork, picking it up slowly, and seeing what that feels like, or encouraging or doing this with your clients in session, right? I do this as a mindfulness practice in my DBT groups and in other ways, and in my individual sessions if someone is struggling with mindful eating. So I'm gonna, let's see what else. So that's really it. This is my contact information. But now I want you guys to ask questions. So I'm gonna stop the share. And so if you don't feel comfortable putting your screen on, that's totally okay. You can send me a private message. I'm happy to answer them publicly. I won't say who sent it, but I will just I will answer the questions. We have about 10 minutes. So really encourage you to ask specific questions if you're a therapist, if you're a client, or whoever you are, how this might apply to you, or if you want me to touch on something else a little bit more specifically. I'm hoping you're all, okay. I see a question. Okay, cool. Maybe this will spark some other thoughts from others. So do you have any tips for getting back on the horse once emotion mind kicks in? So for those of you who don't know emotion mind, I'll explain it really, really briefly. We have 3 states of mind that we often talk about in DBT, and one of them is emotion mind, where we feel like emotions take over. We act on our emotions. Our emotions are really the only thing we're considering when we're making a decision. And so when emotion mind kicks in, it may be very difficult to think about not binging or not restricting or mindful eating. So I think, based on our self-compassion talk, when you fall off the horse, you have to ask yourself, how am I responding to this? Am I saying I'm such an idiot, or I'll never get this right? Here I go again, binging. Like, this is basically not going to work for me. And what is that going to do? That's going to increase guilt, shame, feelings of incompetence, and failure. So that's not going to really help you get back on the horse. It's just going to bring you down. And then what might happen is you'll say, screw it, I'm just going to end up like binging. I'm just going to finish the whole day off. So you really want to figure out, how is this helpful? How is me getting off the horse, being critical, actually going to move me towards my goal? And how do I incorporate self-compassion? So to do that, you might say, all right, this was a really tough day. I was feeling really down. I got some bad news, or I was feeling just so bored and feeling like, what's the meaning of all this with this quarantine and all the things that are going on in this world? And so of course I'm feeling anxious, and of course I'm feeling stressed, and it makes perfect sense that I really just want to eat and just avoid all my responsibilities, right? So that's a compassionate, validating way to speak to yourself. So I would say self-compassion helps you get back on the horse rather than beating yourself up and saying, you know what, I'm just going to give up altogether. So I don't see any other questions. I don't know if you guys are thinking, or if you want me to continue on that question, or if anyone has a follow-up to that. Oh, okay, great. Any ideas to correlate current eating habits to impact in other areas of life? Something like a food diary to bring attention to current habits. So absolutely. I was actually going back and forth of whether to incorporate the food monitoring. I thought that that was a little bit of like the next advanced step, but food monitoring is really important. So I actually have a food diary that I send to clients, and what it has you do is record everything you ate that day in real time. So you're not, at 8 p.m. writing down everything that you wrote. In real time, you're writing down what you ate, exactly what you ate, and where you ate it, right? So what was the context? And what were my thoughts and feelings when this was happening? Was I having the thought, oh my gosh, I'm such a bad partner. Ugh, this donut is like really the only thing that's going to get me through this. Was I having the feeling of anger that, one of my goals was blocked or not met, or I received negative feedback? So you want to start to figure out not only what are you eating, but what were the thoughts and feelings and sensations around what you were eating. And so not only does self-monitoring help with awareness, right? Because if we don't monitor and we're not aware, then what are we going to do to change it? But it also helps change our behavior. So once we know what's going on, you might look at that and say, whoa, like I realize that at 8 p.m., that's when my binge really starts. So I realize that in the morning I wake up and I'm really anxious for the day, and that's when I eat the most. So it's important to kind of figure out when that's happening for you, and self-monitoring is definitely a first step in that direction. Okay, I have another question. When we struggle with emotional eating, should we instead try to stop and deal with the emotions behind it? For example, I just realized I keep saying I wanted something sweet. No matter what I ate, I wanted something else. But really looking back, I was just really procrastinating. Okay, I'm just going to read that silently to myself again. Right. Okay. So basically, when we struggle with emotional eating, it depends. So sometimes if our emotions are really high at a level 10, well, let's just say 0 out of 10, it's on the higher scale. You start noticing 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It may not be helpful to deal with the emotion in that moment, right? Because sometimes we actually want to distract or get some distance from the emotion because it's too overwhelming. So if I'm feeling anger at a level 8 or 9, I may not want to deal with that anger right now because I might make a bad decision. So what I might do instead, and these are some of like distress tolerance skills that we teach in DBT, is I might say, I'm going to go on a really brisk walk, or I'm going to do some jumping jacks, or I'm going to take a really cold shower, or I'm going to put some ice on my face so that I can cool down a little bit. So then I can ask myself, what do I want to do with this emotion? I also think, again, because, you know, I don't want anyone to think, don't eat a piece of chocolate or eat something sweet. Absolutely eat the piece of chocolate and eat something sweet. What I didn't get to as much is one of our self-soothe skills is actually taste. So I know that between my sessions, in the morning, at night, I look forward to a piece of chocolate. Like that's actually something very soothing and comforting to me. And I deserve that. So I would say to this question, if you really want something sweet and you feel like it's effective and you can mindfully eat it, right? So kind of like we did with this exercise, go ahead for it. If it's based on procrastination, you actually might say, okay, I'm mindful and aware that I'm procrastinating right now. Is that effective for me? Is that going to help me in the long term? Does this get in the way of my goal? So what I might do is say, I'm going to make a list of everything that I need to do. I'm going to do 1 or 2 things of it. And then maybe my reward is eating something sweet, right? And that's something that I can look forward to. So if you feel like you're just using food to procrastinate, you may say, well, that's not real. That might be my emotion mind talking, that thing that I was just saying before. So I hope that was helpful with the question. And we have 2 minutes. So if there's one more, I'll get to it. Awesome. Any tips for grocery shopping? So yes, so I would try to be mindful of balanced eating. So again, a lot of times people say, I can't get any carbs, or I can't get any sugar, or I can't get any sweets. And this might be difficult because I would say if someone is struggling with binge eating in the beginning of their binge eating treatment, I wouldn't say buy all of your binge foods, right? Because you're too vulnerable, or you don't have the skills yet, or you haven't really mastered how to ride these urges out. So when I would look for my grocery shopping list, I would try to find a balance of complex carbs, vegetables, proteins, making a list before, making that list in wise mind, which is something that we didn't talk about, but not in emotion mind. Emotion mind may say, get all the donuts, get all the pizza. What if this pandemic happens again and there's no food left, right? So making that list in a place where your emotions aren't taking over. Maybe checking that list out with someone that you really know and care about, or knows you. Like, do you think this is what I should be bringing in? And I would say cooking. Like, cooking is a really important thing. If you plan ahead and you cook your meals earlier, you're less likely to just order something when you do want to binge, or when you're feeling really emotional, or, you know, you're procrastinating and things like that. So if you're cooking and you have things prepared and there for you, you're going to feel good and you're going to feel better. Well, thank you for all these great questions. I'm glad you guys jumped in with this. So remember, this is just kind of like an intro. You know, if you feel like you need more help with this, or you're a client and you want to jump into this more, you know, you could engage in individual therapy for this. Mindful eating is really challenging. It's a practice. It's something you need to commit to over and over again. So just remember that. It takes a lot of time. It does feel weird to mindfully eat if you are someone who does kind of engage in impulsive eating or even restricting. But I appreciate you all so much for coming and providing your questions, and also, you know, your ability to jump in and practice doing the mindful eating. I think that that's helpful. But I'm going to have someone send you all of the PowerPoint slides so you can take a look at this, and feel free to email me. I have my email information. Oops, how do I share this? I lost you guys. Share. If you guys want to just jot down my contact information, you can absolutely email me with any other questions. And that's the direct line for our practice. If you have any questions or interested in any groups or individual therapy or any resources that we provide, like these webinars and workshops. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much again, and good luck. Have a great weekend, and hope to see you at some time soon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course.